I'm going to speak about a series of workshops that we've undertaken since 2012. It's been a collaboration between different departments of the Estonian Academy of Arts and also the kind of building physics related departments of the Tallinn University of Technology. So, Forsaken Landscapes, it wasn't originally the title that the workshop varied or kind of introduced itself to the students, but it probably is the best way to summarize this diversity that we've been through. So I'm going to start with this image. It's related to the first workshop. It's a piece of oil shale. It's a kind of, so to speak, rock that's being mined in Estonia, and most of the power, electrical power plants are fed by this energy source. But you know, next to the fact that I just told you, why I'm showing this is that some of the evolutionary biologists might claim that some of the small, in this image, shattered pieces actually might exhibit the first occurrence of intelligent life on Earth. So I'm trying to summarize or outline the series of workshops perhaps through the viewpoint of practice, both of practice in the sense of being an architect, or in other cases that people have been involved with being either engineers or people who are specialized in preservation and heritage protection. So it's a kind of an attempt to think about the practice or the professions involved with the spatial realm through these workshops. So this is actually the first workshop where the first workshop took place, and this piece of oil shale actually came from this pile of brownish material behind it. So it's a kind of oil tower, so to speak. It used to be a kind of the proudest moments of independent Estonia before World War II. But now, for the last decades, it has been left aside, and basically it's kind of slowly decaying and fragmenting into the landscape surrounding it. And the other reason why I'm showing this image is a kind of a rare instance, in my opinion at least, as a practitioner myself, and while speaking to my colleagues internationally, there's really a case where both architect, engineer, in these cases heritage related experts and other professions, interior architects, take the first site visit together actually. In most cases it's probably either a design related professional first coming up with ideas, drawing the projects, and then inviting the experts to collaborate, or sometimes the other way around. So on the forefront, my good colleague Andres Ojari, who has also been involved with this series from the beginning, perhaps even more deeply than I have been. So a close-up view of this oil shale tower, just to give you an idea that even when it was built, it was the kind of considering that it's an industrial building for producing actually oil from this oil shale. So it's not this kind of crude burning and producing electricity. It's actually trying to refine the substance and, you know, perhaps give it some more intelligent uses. But from this image, you can see that in many cases, these industrial buildings, you know, more or less right after they've been erected, they also need to change because the technology either related to them or inside them changes so radically that the kind of physical, architectural space around them has to change as well. So some of the people in the core team that more or less have been involved with this process, I already mentioned Andres Ojari, Tüüne, Maris Mandel, a heritage and conservation expert, having a keen interest in building materials and structures, and Tarko Kalamees, who perhaps relates to these earlier discussions about energy analysis and sustainable design, since he's one of the authors and the main kind of expert in Estonia in terms of building physics and also our version of LEED or BREEAM. Another workshop, a very different kind, in completely different part of Estonia, when the last one was in the northeastern Estonia, in so-called kind of Russian-habited region with the minings of different kind. This is actually on a kind of very more or less picturesque island called Hiiumaa. It's a church from 19th century, but because of the transformations of Estonia, because of our belonging to Soviet Union, of course, these kind of religion-related practices were at least into a large extent forbidden. So you can see from the surroundings that this church is actually not only itself in a certain decay, but also the kind of landscape around it is very, very variable. We're not only bound to the kind of smart people or experts in Estonia. We've also invited well-known international educators. On the right, you can see Ranulf Glanville, kind of architect trained cybernetician. On the right, on the far left, actually, you can see Tom Gallabout, an interior architect from Belgium, who's been also involved with the SISU series. So in this case, we were dealing with a completely different loss of function, so to speak. It's a kind of former church building that doesn't operate as a church anymore. So, of course, it's not an easy task for the students to, you know, address or tackle with, since these workshops usually, at least in their so-called design phase, take perhaps a week in maximum. Of course, it's not only this design phase that's important for us while we organize these workshops. It's also the kind of preparation for these quite challenging sites or buildings. So on this image you can see one of the kind of key figures in the, at least from the engineering point of view of pre-World War II and later structural engineering achievements. He's been involved with the kind of reconstruction and renovation of so-called seaplane hangars, for example, that were the first known instance of thin shell concrete structures in Estonia, but this is another topic. I'm just trying to give an overview of the scope that these people have. But it's not only these people with technical expertise. We also while preparing the students for the workshops, we also invite, for example, artists or landscape architects, philosophers like Eik, you heard earlier, speak to the students to kind of try to, trigger the process of asking the right questions when we face these quite miserable sites in some cases. And the students, of course, they have their enthusiasm because it's one of the few cases in their curriculum, while being an elective in most cases for them. It's a few cases among the few cases when they actually can work quite closely with the other disciplines, architects with interior architects, engineers, energy design analysts, and sometimes also people or students with the background of liberal arts. So just to give you an overview of the scope, there's another church that we dealt with. In this case, it's not at all in a very abandoned location somewhere on the outskirts of Estonia, but actually in the very middle of the medieval old town of Tallinn. So while being partially used, this Katariina church is actually has lost at least half of its, or maybe more of its original physical embodiment. And in this case, you can see how the students actually tried to build a garden of sorts within this medieval walls, and actually hang or float buildings above it. Of course, I mean, these workshops, while including the preparation and in the architecture students' case, finding the relevant case studies from all over the world, they actually have to, do something within a very short time. So sometimes, I mean, we've been quite open-minded as tutors, so they do quite to the contrary that perhaps the heritage people, for example, would think or energy analysis would allow. Another case, a former textile factory, also, like in many of these cases, having had a really kind of proud moments in history, being one of the largest wool-based textile factories in the 19th century Estonia. Well, Estonia was still part of the kind of Russian empire, the Tsar-ruled empire. About 10 years ago, lost in fire all of its roof structure and the floors between them. So it's been there in the open air, facing the climate. And it's not been easy to the brick built structure. As you can see, we're wearing kind of construction site helmets. It's not because something is finally being built there, as if the structure has been has been brought into the process of renovation. It's actually because these bricks fall almost like rain there sometimes. So it was quite dangerous actually to take place, to go to the location. Just to show you that the students actually are quite passionate to work together, and I guess in some ways feel empowered. I mean, just to reiterate in a way, there's always groups of students from different backgrounds, mixed actually. So there's always an architecture student, usually an interior architecture student, also building physics and heritage related people in every group, and they all address the same site at once while giving very different proposals or are asking quite different questions sometimes. In this case, just to in a form of brief remark, I would say that it's not essential, of course, in these cases, while we're mostly dealing with the industrial heritage that used to have the kind of, used to be at the forefront of technology at that time. So it's not kind of mandatory or kind of the basic need for the students to use new technologies, but we've seen within the process of these 5 years that, for example, just giving them a laser cutter and a direct access to that device 24/7, they're much more open to explorations and much more quick to take the kind of leap from the world of ideas to the actual physical experimentation. Who's afraid of Copley lines? So another workshop in a series, in this case related to industrial heritage, but actually about buildings that were erected in a quite fast manner before World War I for the kind of apartments of the factory workers. So it's a kind of complete neighborhood, at least in its original form. But now, as you can see from the log buildings, mostly the brick-built staircases are there. So, of course, students can be quite eclectic in these cases. They feel the kind of urgency, of course, of giving some sort of clues or guidelines, perhaps to the local people who always, I think most of the workshops have been involved as well in a form of either kind of direct owner of the site or the kind of citizens interested in the kind of renovation of these buildings. The last workshops in a series is actually also quite loaded with different kind of, let's say, ambitions and perhaps burdens of history. It's actually the crossroads of Estonian railroad. It's called Tapa. It's not a kind of, let's say, a very textbook case of a town development. While it's located next to a river of length of 200 kilometers, it actually quite much just is on the side of it and hasn't been erected because of the river, but mainly because of the railroad, also in the latter part of 19th century. And this railway station on the right is quite important for the citizens of Tapa, actually. In many cases within Estonia, Tapa has been referred to as one of the kind of not so beautiful landscapes or cityscapes. And for them, this historic railway building is actually a kind of symbol of their integrity in some ways. But of course, and these kind of towers of the steam engine power, the trains that needed water for their operation. So it's also loaded with different kind of, I would say, political burdens. In the Soviet era, it used to be a kind of main camp for the Soviet military and a nearby airfield. On the background, you can actually see a train that goes to Tallinn and Moscow. So just to kind of perhaps summarize this kind of in some ways fragmented approaches that I've shown to you, perhaps the kind of best cases in my view have been best kind of events involving the workshop and the structures have been when the students have had a kind of direct contact, almost kind of physical presence to the locations. So when we think about the first oil tower, it was actually very dangerous to visit that tower. We all had to sign a legal agreement with the owner. So if something would happen to us, someone would fall from the stairs or from the open windows, it would be our own responsibility. But in this case, in Tapas Railway, we actually, I think, found a rather good outcome to show and involve the local people. So in this case also Riin Alatalu was involved, and Oliver Orro, of course, who's been involved in most of the workshops as well. And Riin Alatalu, with her great organizing skills, actually listed this building into the so-called museum night event that takes place in every May, end of May, in Estonia, when most of the museums have kind of open door policy. No one has to buy a ticket, and many people who probably otherwise wouldn't go to the museums visit them quite often and in large amounts. So in our case, we actually made the kind of final presentations of the projects and some new event spaces right within this kind of decaying railway station. I think about 40 or 50 people from the local community came. These involved actually local government and also the representative of the Estonian Railroad. And the students addressed many issues that we actually that were actually the triggers for choosing this location. So while I mentioned that this town was the location for the Soviet troops, just to remind you that, in case you're not Estonians, that the Soviet troops left in 1994. So now actually Tapa has been transformed into the main military base for the Allied forces supporting us in NATO and in other operations. So in this project, which was quite a kind of interesting idea from the students, they actually tried to build up a system where kind of social space of interacting, exchanging recipes of the various nationalities that come to this town would have kind of some sort of shared location where to meet and get a better understanding of Estonia than just the military camp or the forest that they do their training in. The other kind of good example of the site-specific or the location-specific project is actually this collection of water classes, because Tapa, the kind of drinking water was polluted with jet engine fuel in the Soviet era, and also some railroad kind of accidents have happened that have left their mark on the local water. So students actually built an installation of all different waters of the different locations in Estonia to give a kind of certain centrality or kind of conceptual summary of this theme. Of course, they also, while I'm not showing them too many times in this presentation, they also suggested some rather well thought through cases where the town and the railroad station could have a better relationship. So removing or partially closing one of the railroads on one side of this kind of island-based railroad station was their answer. And to conclude with one of the projects, it was actually a rather interesting example of bringing the local Tapa Museum of History through streaming interactive technologies to this location, and the lady on the screen actually is explaining to the audience in real time within the kind of building of this museum, and it's being streamed to this location of the railroad station. And the children playing some games with headlamps, perhaps referring to the first project that was related to mining. So, yeah, I've given an outline what we've done, and it's an ongoing series of workshops, and as you can see, the specific sites chosen have been quite different. So, while trying to give a certain summary of what we've done or what have been our so-called methods, I realized that perhaps more questions are left in the air. Thank you.